Okay, good evening. Hope you're all doing well. First of all, thank you, Rabbi Brandis, for fixing the Wi-Fi. Now I can actually record things on Zoom. Appreciate it very much. Today we're going to be learning Chullin Maseches Chullin Daf Nun Vav, and we're starting about, I'd say, 10, 12 lines from the bottom of Nun Hey Amid Beis. There was a teku there, right in the middle of the line, and we're picking up right after that. Amar Rab. Kol ha'or kulo matzil begluda. If there's any skin at all, that will prevent the psul, the treifa psul of a gluda of an animal that has no skin. So that seems to be that it has to be like mamish flayed, A to Z. Now then it's going to be puzzle. But if there is any skin, so then it saves it. Chutz me'or beis haprasos. With the exception of the skin that's very close to the beis haprasos, to the hooves. That skin's not regular skin, and an animal that skin would not be matzil. That wouldn't save. Rav Yochanan Amar, I disagree. Afilu or beis haprasos nami matzil. Actually, he holds that the skin of the hooves, that too would be sufficient to make an animal not puzzle. Amar le limad tanu rabbeinu. Wait 1 second. Rav Yochanan, you taught. You are correct. Ba'amine, thank you. Ba'amine Rav Asi me Rav Yochanan. Rav Asi says to Rav Yochanan, or Beis HaPrasos, Mao sheyatzil begluda. What should be the din if there is a little bit of skin by the hooves? So should that save an animal that's been flayed? So the Gemara says, Amar le matzil. Amar le. Rav Asi says back to Rav Yochanan, Rebbe, I don't understand. Limadatanu Rabbeinu. You taught us something that I'm going to quote back to you right now, something we've seen a couple of times in Shas. Elu she'orosehin kivisaran. There are some scenarios where a skin type, we know just from modern science, we know there are different skin types, right? We know there's different types of skin. The skin on the heel is a little bit more callous. The skin on the front of our fingertips is different than the skin on the back of our hands, which is still different than the skin on our face. We have a lot of different skin profiles. So sometimes or has the din of basar. And if that's true, Rav Yochanan, says Rav Asi, then I don't understand something, because what did you teach us? There's a case of where the or is like the basar, which is or beis haprasos. So we see that that doesn't have a din of skin. That is a din of basar. So then, Rebbe, how can you say, Rav Yochanan, not Rebbe, in regards to Yehuda Nasi, but Rabbi Yochanan, how can you say that or Beis HaPrasos is going to be matzil? At the end of the day, it's treated kivasara. So Rabbi Yochanan says back to Rav Asi, Amar le, al takniteni, please don't be difficult. Don't antagonize me. Shebelashon yachid ani shona osa. When I taught that, I was just pointing out that that's a das yachid. And the Gemara is now going to show in a brisa how there are different ways to understand the skin of the Beis HaPrasos. To be clear, this brisa is going to be more complex than we need for our purposes. So as we learn it, I just want us to have a lens that we are simply looking for a different way to understand the or Beis HaPrasos. So let's dig into this brisa, a brisa that's found in Zvachim. The brisa says, the Tanya, or 7 lines from the bottom, 6 lines from the bottom. Hashochet es ha'ola. Let's say a person shechts an ola, and they did so lahaktir kezayis me'or shel tachas ha'alya. They did so with intent to. They did so with an animal that had a kezayis of or that was under the tail. If it was chutz lemekomo, so then the halacha is that it's puzzle. Ve'in bo kares. If it's chutz lezmano, then pigol v'chayav an alav kares. Not the din that we need. Let's continue. The Gemara says Eliezer ben Yehuda ish evalim Amar Mishur Mev Yaakov, Haya Reb Shimon ben Yehuda, Ish, Ikus, Omer, Mishum Reb Shimon, quite a lot of names. They said in the name of Reb Shimon, Echad or Beis HaPrasos, Ve'echad or Harosh, Shel Egel Harach, Ve'echad or Shel Tachas Ha'alya, Ve'kol Shemanu Chachamim Gabe Tuma Elu, She'orosin Kivisaran, Havi or Beis HaBoshet. Let's translate a little bit. Whether or not we're talking about the skin that's close to the hooves. Oh, sorry, hope you can still hear. Can you still hear on the Zoom? Because something changed. Yeah, okay, thank you. Whether or not we're talking about the skin that's near the hooves, whether or not we're talking about the skin that's on the head of a baby calf, whether or not we're talking about the skin that's under the tail. And in any case where the Chachamim said that there's Tuma and that She'oro Sen is Kibasalam, Havi or Beis HaBoshes, to talk about the or, which is the Beis HaBoshes, which is near the private parts. So then, in those cases, chutz l'makomo pasel bein bo karetz, chutz l'zmano pigel v'cheven alav karetz. Now that must mean that it's skin. So therefore, we see that there are varying opinions in regards to the skin. So Rav Asi's question on his Rabbi Yochanan falls away. That brings us to a new Mishnah on the top of Nun Vav Amud Aleph, today's daf. Let's continue. Ve'elu trefos be'of. Now, let's talk about the trefos, the things that make a bird invalid. Remember, the primary distinction between a behema and an oaf is that a behema requires rov shtei simanim, and an oaf requires rov siman echad. That's the major distinction between the two. We assume that animals that are large have a harder time to be killed than birds. So says the Gemara as follows: what are the trefos of a bird? Nekuvas haveshet. If there is a hole in the veshet, which is the esophagus, we know that the esophagus is more halachically sensitive than the veshet, than the kane. Upsukas hagargeres. If the gargeres, which is code word for the kane, as we've seen earlier in this Masechta, so the Gemara says that if it's been cut. And next, hiksa chulda al rosha b'makom she'osa osa trefa. A chulda, some type of rodent, bites the animal on its head in a place where it would make it a trefa. Very detailed. So again, another psul and a trefa for another trefa for a bird is if the animal gets bitten in the head in a place where it becomes a trefa. We're going to discuss this in the Gemara. Nikev hakur kivan, if the gizzard gets pierced. Nikvu hadakin, if the intestines get pierced. And nafla le'or v'nechmeru b'nei me'eha, if a bird falls into a fire and its innards, its intestines get burnt, so then, im yirokim, if they turn green from the heat, then psulim, they'll be puzzle. And im adumim, if they're going to be red, then ksherim, then the halacha is that they'll be kosher. That's again, all the dinim of the b'nei me'eha of a bird that got burnt. Dirasa, if the animal was trampled on. Vitarfa bakosel, it was kicked into the wall. Oshiritzisa behema, or it was trampled by an animal. Then, if it's still umefarcheses, if the animal can still move around, vishaha same es la'es, and it could still live for 24 hours. So says the Gemara, says the Mishnah, vishachta ksheira. So there we only have a concern of me'es la'es. We're definitely more makel with birds than we are by behemoths. Let's get into the details. Let's talk about a case scenario, and we're going to learn a couple of Rashis here. The Gemara on its own is a little cryptic. The Gemara says, opening about 10 lines down on Nun Vav Amud Aleph, the Gemara says, Rav Shmuel v'Levi de Amre, they all held, Machnes yado lifnim ubodek. In order to check, and what are we talking about over here? What are we checking? Rashi at the open of the Gemara, a little bit more than halfway down, opposite Tosfos Mar, Rashi says, Machnis yodo befiv shel of. Why would we put our fingers in the mouth of the bird to check it? Because she neshachto chulda berosho. So it got bit in the head by a rodent of some kind, a weasel. And the way to check it, if there's a pierce in the skull that goes into the brain, how do we check it? Your machnis yodo lifnim ubodek. Back in the Gemara, this is gross. Im mivatzveis ve'ole. If when I put my finger in the mouth and press on the palate and brain comes out of the hole at the top, disgusting. This says the Gemara trefa. Remember, these animals, they're like cartilage. They're very soft, right? So if you press on the palate and you push hard enough, again, I've never tried this at home. Please don't try this at home. But if you did that and there was really a trefa hole in the head, and you push, the brain will come out of the top. So if it's mevatzvei tzva'ola, trefa. V'im lav, if the bird was bit on the head by this type of rodent or weasel, and there is a hole in the skull, and I test it by pressing upward on the palate, but nothing comes out, no brain, then ksheira. Because after all, we know that there's a krum. We know that there's some type of sheath that surrounds the brain. In fact, we learned that there are two sheaths inside the brain, one that hugs the skull and one that hugs the brain. You may recall we learned this a while ago. Now the Gemara picks up exactly on this. Ha nicha, I could understand this din. Leman de Omar, ademan kiv kramatata. I could understand that the psul of the brain is when the krum on the brain is the one that tears. Ella, lemanda omar inkiv ila'a, afal gav delo inkiv tata. According to the one who says that where is there a psul when the sheath in the brain tears? That's only if the upper sheath tears, but not the inner one. Well, nechush, what we should be concerned about is dilma ilah inkav. Maybe what we should be worried about if there's no brain coming out of the head when I press on the palate. If there's no brain coming out, maybe that's not because the krum the tata has a hole. Maybe that doesn't have a hole, but maybe the upper one does have a hole. So according to that shita, should be puzzle, or at least we should have to check. It's not so simple that just by pushing on the palate and checking that you're going to say, if there's no brain coming out, that you're going to be kosher, because after all, maybe the brain is intact, but the krum that hugs the skull is torn. Says the Gemara, that's not how it works. Because there's a difference between the sheath that hugs the skull and the sheath that hugs the brain. Isa de in kivila. If it were to be that the sheath that hugs, that is right up against the skull, if that one tore, then tata agav ruchache mifka paka. Then the sheath that hugs the brain is much softer. And when you push on the palate upward, the sheath around the brain will instantly tear, and then we would know. So what we were concerned about, this was the Gemara's question. According to the Shita that says that the psul is only with the sheath that hugs the skull, well, maybe we could have a scenario where there's no brain coming out when you press on the palate. But maybe that's because the sheath on the skull may have a hole in it, but the sheath around the brain doesn't. And really it's puzzle. That's a problem. And your test is not a good test. Because the fact that no brain comes out, it may not be because the sheath that hugs the skull is so perfect. Maybe it's because there's a hole there, but so maybe we would have to check. Says the Gemara, no. Is that the sheath that hugs the brain is much softer than the sheath that hugs the skull. I've never checked. I don't know the science here, but that's what the Gemara says. So therefore, our test of Rav and Shmuel and Levi is a wonderful test. Gross, but accurate. Omar Ze'iri. Ze'iri says, seemingly contradicting what we've learned, we'll see soon that that's not the case. He says, Ein bedika lechulda, there's no bedika for what the chulda did by biting the skull of the chicken, mipnei sheshineha dakos, because its teeth are very thin. Says the Gemara, who cares how thick the teeth are? If the brain comes out when you press on the palate, it's a treifa. If it doesn't, it doesn't. We'll use the same exact test. Who cares? Says the Gemara, "V'chishineha dakos my have." Who cares if the teeth are thin? Says the Gemara, it matters. Amar Rav Oshaya, we're not talking about the fact that the teeth are just thin, but rather mipnei sheshineha dakos ve'akumos. It's not just that they're thin; they're curved. So when the animal bites into the skull, it goes in curved. So the hole that's in the skull is in a different place than the hole that's in the sheath that hugs the skull, because it's not going in perfectly straight. It's going in and curving. So that was the Gemara's concern. And that's why Ze'iri says that there's no way to check the bite of a weasel or whatever rodent this is, because the teeth are curved. So it goes in the skull in one place, but then by the time it pierces the sheath that hugs the skull, now it's not a linear line. Now they're off a little bit from one another. However, Kisalik Naharda, when Ze'iri showed up in Naharda, he changed his mind. Shalach lehu, what did he say? Dvarim shamarti lifnechem, that which I said to you earlier, ta'uz hein biyadi. That was a mistake that I said. Viram, in real life, the truth is, kach amru mishmei de Reb Shimon ben Lakish, bodkin lechulda biyad. We're able to check the chulda biyad. And that was what we said, machnis yado, you press on the upper palate. Aval, lo b'masmer. But what you're not allowed to do is take a nail and run it across the krum, after the animal is dead, of course, to see if, in fact, there is a hole, because the nail itself is too sharp and could tear the sheath. Rabbi Yochanan Amar af b'masmer. So we see that Ze'iri really retracts his shita. Fine. Next layer. We're halfway down on Nun Vav Amud Aleph. Ubeplugta de Rabbi Yehuda v'Reb Nechemia. What is the machlokes of Rabbi Yehuda of Reb Nechemia? So here we're going to see something slightly different than we saw before. Chad, one of them was Badik Biyada. One of them agreed to the test of Rav and Shmuel and Levi that we learned at the open of the Gemara, that Machnis Yado Lifnim Ubodek, that you press upward on the palate. V'chad Badik B'machta, and one would check with a needle. And what he would do is see a needle, some type of pokey thing, just and run it over the sheath that's on the skull to see if in fact there's a hole. And then they had to throw some barbs at one another. The Gemara says as follows: Man de badik biyada. Again, we don't know who holds what yet. But according to the Shita, the one who holds that we do the check with our finger and we press on the inside upper palate and see if brain comes out. Amar le'laman de badik b'machta. He said to the one who was checking with a needle, Ad masai ato mechalem amonon shel Yisrael. What kind of check are you doing? You're sticking a needle on a very thin piece of fascia. What do you think is going to happen? You're going to make it treif. So Pasha, you're taking mamon and shal Yisrael. Stop doing that. You're checking the wrong way. And Omar Le, man de badik b'machta, the one who checks with a needle, leman de badik biyada, he says to the one who is checking with his hands, ad masai atamachel Yisrael nevelos. Your check isn't high quality enough, and therefore could very well be that the animal is still a treifa. A little schwer to understand exactly why this is the svara, but that is what he said. Says the Gemara, why would it be nevelos? Nevelos v'hashchutahi. This animal shechted, it's not a nevela. It might be a treifa, but it's not a nevela. Says the Gemara, you're right. Ela treifos, because shema nikev krum shel moach. The reason why we're concerned about nevelos is because it might pierce the sheath of the brain. Now that is all this machlokes between these two people of Rabbi Yehuda and Reb Nechemia. The Gemara now explains to us who holds what within this machlokes. We are 5 lines before the wide lines. Tistayim. We can conclude the Rabbi Yehuda who the badik biyada. The Rabbi Yehuda was the one who checked with his bare hands. How do we know that it was him? Because Tanya, just to be clear, we're not talking about Rabbi Yehuda the Amora, the Talmud of Rav and Shmuel. We're talking about Rabbi Yehuda the Tana. Remember who he was fighting with. If you look back up, it says V'plugta Rabbi Yehuda the Reb Nechemia. Reb Nechemia as well was a Tana. Where do we see that Rabbi Yehuda would do the Bedika Biyad? So the Gemara says as follows, 2/3 of the way down. Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer Mishum Reb Yehuda. What does he say? Bodkin lechulda biyad, avalo b'masmer. And the Brisa continues, and this is a Tosefta actually from this Masechta. Nishbar ha'etzem, if the skull were to break, then afal pi shelo nikev krum shel moach, if the skull breaks, even if the sheath is in perfect condition, the animal is a treifa. So says the Gemara, Tistayim, we therefore can conclude that it must be that Rabbi Yehuda, within the machlokes of Rabbi Yehuda and Reb Nechemia, it must be that Rabbi Yehuda is the one who holds that that we do the bedika biyad, because he says, Mishum Rabbi Yehuda, bodkin l'chulda biyad. Says the Gemara, you just showed me a brisa that supports the opinion that Rabbi Yehuda holds you do a bedika biyad. Very fine and good. But there's a stira within that brisa. The brisa we just saw, these last 4 lines, we said 2 things. Rabbi Yehuda said bodkin l'chulda biyad, but not with a nail. And the second din was that if the skull broke, then even if the krum shel moach didn't have a pierce, animal's a treifa. So what's this stira? Hagufa kashya. The Gemara says, Amris, first you said in the name of Rabbi Yehuda that bodkin l'chulda biyad avalo b'masmer, that when we are checking the injury that a chulda caused, we check with our bare hands, pressing on the upper palate. But we don't use a nail. Alma isleib dikusa. We have a way to check what's going on in the brain with the sheath. If the sheath is intact, brain won't come out. So we see that there is a way to do b'dika. However, the last part of that tosef, the v'hadar tani, when it says nishbar ha'etzem, afal pisha lo nikev krum shel moach, that if you break the skull, then we assume that even if there is no break of the sheath, that it's a treifa. Nobody's checking the sheath anymore. So says the Gemara, I don't understand. Alma les leib dikusa. It seems like we don't even care about checking it anymore, because if the animal bit through the skull, So then the animal's a treifa because you just said that nishbar hamoch. So then what's the point of the whole discussion about the skull? Do we have a bdika like Rabbi Yehuda holds in the Tosefta, or the implication of the nishbar case that we don't? Says the Gemara, Seifa, no, that case of nishbar ha'etzem is different. Seifa asan le'of shel mayim. This is talking about a bird that lives on the water. Hoil ve'ein lo krum. Fascinating. The Gemara says that birds that live on the water don't have this sheath in their brain. Says the Gemara, as though we're supposed to know. Ein lo krum salkadaitach. Really? A duck doesn't have a sheath on its brain because it's on water? Like,
I think the question is that the sheath holds the brain in place.
to some degree.
It can't be without that membrane. That's what I think.
Yes. I mean, it definitely is an odd assumption that just because you're exposed to water that would be the case.
Like how is the bird living?
Yep. Ella, the Gemara says, oh, you're right. I didn't mean to say that ein lo krum. All I meant to say was Ella hol v'krumo rach, that it has a very, very soft krum. So therefore, with those birds only, not birds that are on dry land. Let's say pigeons are on dry land. Most of the birds we live on dry land. We don't live by the water. Seagulls live on the water, whatever those birds are. So if it's a seagull, so the Gemara says it's krumo rach. And therefore, if it gets bitten in the head, by definition, it's so soft it will break. That's why you don't have to check. But with birds that are land-based birds, pashut that you still have to check. And similarly, what? But yes, but it's underneath. It's on the brain. It's actually the sheath. It's not the skull that's soft. It's what's under the skull that's soft. Amar le Rav Nachman the Rav Anan. Mar Amar, my teacher taught me that Shmuel badik biyada umachsher. Shmuel would check, he would press on the upper palate. V'huna chavrin Amar Rav. Huna chavrin said in the name of Rav that badik biyada umachsher. We see Shmuel and Rav checked barehanded. V'hatani Levi, hold on 1 second. Treifos shemanu chachamim b'behema kenegdon ba'ov. We know that there are certain treifos that the chachamim articulated by a behema, and those apply by an oaf as well. But yeser alehem oaf. But there was something extra in regards to an oaf. What was that? That nishbar ha'etzem afal pi shelo nikev krum shel moach. So that seems to be again that birds don't have a bdika, because you said it's puzzled just by the skull and not meaning we almost assume that the krum shel moach is broken. Amar le 100%, same as like we saw before. No, hahu ba'of shel mayim hol ve'ein lo krum. Ein lo krum sal kadaitach el hol v'krum orach. Similar, just they came up in different ways, but apparently the chachamim who were discussing this had this like idiom almost of like, yeah, they don't have a krum shel moach. No, it doesn't mean that they don't have a krum shel moach. It just means that it's very, very soft. Another one, 5 lines from the bottom of the page. Nun vav amud aleph. Hahi tarnagola. The havoy be Reb Chana. There was a tarnagolta, There was a tarnagolta that was by Bei Reb Chana. And the Gemara says, Shadre lekame de Rav Masna. And they brought the animal in front of Rav Masna. He looked at it and quoted what we've learned earlier in the Tosefta. Nishbar ha'etzem v'lo nikrev krum shel moach havoy v'achshrei. It's not really. Look, it's a little different. It doesn't say we don't have a bdika. Look what it says. If the skull is broken, v'lo nikrev krum shel moach, but the sheath is unbroken, the achshrei. How can you say that? Amar Levi, Hatani Levi, Trefo Shemanu Chachamim b'mehema kenegdon ba'of. That we know that the Chachamim said that there were certain trefos that were true by a behema that also applied to a bird, but birds had a chumrah. Yes, erleim oaf that nishbar be'etzem. Don't tell me that if it's still intact, it's kosher. What did the Tosefta say? Afal pisha lo nikev krum shel moach, that it's treif. So how can you? And this was answered by Rav Masna. How could Rav Masna say that if the krum shel moach, when the animal is bit in the head, if the krum shel moach is intact, how can you say it's kosher? The Tosefta says the exact opposite of what you're saying. That even if it's intact, we don't care. The animal's a treifa. Stira between the Tosefta and Rav Masna. So Amar le hasam ba'ov shel mayim hova ein lo krum. That's different. The Tosefta was talking about a case where it was a water-based animal, where the krum shel moach is so soft that by definition, when the animal was bit in the head, we assume that the krum shel moach was pierced as well. Hi, ein lo krum salkadaitach no ela ein mahol v'krum orach. Bottom of nun vav amid aleph. What were other ways to check for the krum shel moach, for holes in the brain? Rav Shezvi Badik B'Shimsha, he would check by sunlight. Sometimes you kind of hold things up to the sun to see if there's any light coming through. Rav Yemar Badik B'Maya, Rav Yemar would check with water. I guess he would empty out the brain, put water in, and see if water leaked through the sheath and the skull. So it's quite intense. Let's just go buy a new chicken. Yeah. In our era, right? But for them, like they were so potentially so poor that like this was dinner, this was Shabbos. So we're not like that. I remember 20 years ago, 23 years ago, I was living in Eretz Yisrael in Smicha. I bought chicken from the store, and it was a chicken with a bone, and when I opened it, the bone head was cracked, and there was a lot of red. It looked like a lot of blood. So I called my Rebbe Muvak, Rav David Miller, and he was fascinating because it's not a treifa. I mean, it might not be good for korbanos, but it was totally mutter to eat. It wasn't problematic. But he said you just can't eat the very, very densely red piece. Fascinating. Really? Yeah. Yeah, that's what he said to me.
The assumption that it didn't salt out, or?
I don't remember.
You said the bone was broken? Was that? Oh, marrow wouldn't have been.
Marrow, no, but
Would have been nothing.
no, the marrow, not because of the marrow, but it must have happened right as the animal died, right after shechita. Yeah, correct. And then a little bit of blood came out, but it wasn't like, but it absorbed into something. He's like, you just cut that little piece out. It was very interesting. I've never asked anybody about it. I don't remember even the lumdus of it. I just remember that. I remember being surprised by the answer. But that was what he said. So, okay. Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, how did he check? Badik begila dechitza, turning to the top of Nun Vav Amud Beis. We're not going to be able to get to Nun Zayin today. It's just too much material. But on the top, it said he checked with begila dechitza. He was able to check with, similar to a nail. He would take like a piece of wheat and he would draw it over the sheath. And if it would catch, then he knew there was a hole. Amr of Shezvi, Hani Avze Didan, these birds that live by us, Rashi, Avze Didan, fifth line, Hol v'tamid hein b'mayim, because they always live near water, Ke'of shel mayim damyan, and what's the implications of a bird living near water? That is that the krum shel moach is much softer. What do you have, David?
Pouring water into that.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, empty out the brain, pour water in there, and see if it seeps out.
Hard pass. By the way, if ever there was an
Next time you complain about your job, Stan's gonna remind you, it's gonna bring you a pitcher of water.
I don't know.
Doesn't sound so bad anymore, does it?
I don't know. Maybe I want to test the brain. I don't know. We'll see. That's amazing. Good. Okay, Nafla La'or, our Mishnah that we started with, or almost started with tonight on the top of Nun Vav, spoke about a bird that got burned in the fire, and its intestines, the B'nai Me'eha, changed colors. So that's what we're going to discuss for the next little bit, up until the upcoming Mishnah. Nafla La'or, Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Yossi ben Yehoshua, shiur Yerukasan Kishiur Nekuvasan. If you'll recall in our Mishnah, we said that something that's green, if the innards are green, treifa. The Gemara says, what is the measure of green? Similar to nekuvasan, to a hole. Ma nekuvasan b'mashahu, af yerukasan b'mashahu, huge chumrah. Which is that if there's any green when it comes to the insides of this animal that got burnt, it's going to be a treifa. It's an odd comparison to me because the nekuva is its own psul. Yeah, a needle, you poke it, minuscule. You talk about like our high gauge needle, 29s, 30s, these tiny, tiny needles that we use to self-inject, they're almost invisible, like after the pierce, they're almost invisible. Fine. The Gemara is machmir. So Ba'amine Rav Yosef Rav Yoshua ben Levi, may Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. He asks a question. Yosef, this was the son of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, asks his father a question. I love these because then you get to see family trees. So Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi's son was Yosef. Yosef ben Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. I did a bris today and I made the error of not asking the family the baby's Hebrew name before I was in the middle of Kriyas Hashem. Actually, somebody else read the Kriyas Hashem. Family said the baby's name was Yonah. That was good. Middle name, Ha'aviv. So I corrected them. I'm like, Aviv. They're like, no, Ha-Aviv. I'm like, okay, sure. Baby's name is Yonah Ha-Aviv. Yonah the summer, it's like an interesting thing. So here, Yosef is a normal name, Baruch Hashem. Always got to check the names, no? I got to. Okay. Oh, I didn't even tell this to you. I did a bris yesterday. He made a donation to the ATT alatar on the spot. Yeah, it's good business, no? He underpaid me, but he gave the rest of it to the ATT. So it's all good. So long as it comes to the ATT, any other implications don't matter. Yeah. He texted me. He said, "Can I please donate to your organization?" I laid in. I'm like, actually, we have, if you know some billionaires, I totally laid in. He's like, "Let me see who I know." I'm like, Givaldik, huh? Yeshua Hashem Karafine. I'll take. You never know where it comes from. So he made a nice donation. So good. Says the Gemara, Yosef, the son of Yoshua ben Levi, asks, Horika kaved keneged b'nei me'ayim mahu. If the liver turns green near the b'nei me'ayim. Remember that our subject of the Mishnah was the b'nei me'ayim, not the kaved, not the liver. What if the liver turns green next to the b'nei me'ayim? Amar le treifa. Why would you say that, Tati? Right? Yosef's talking to his father, Rabbi Shimon Levi. Why don't we view that section as though it was removed? Because Amar Rava, Kevan Shehorika Kaved Keneged Bnei Me'ayim. When we see that the liver, which is opposite the Bnei Me'ayim, turns green, Biyadua Shenafla Le'or V'nechmru Bnei Me'ayim V'trefa. That's already evidence, right? If we're looking for evidence as to what happened, the fact that the kaveh turned that color next to the b'nei me'ayim, it means that the b'nei me'ayim are also burnt. Seemingly, the kaveh will change colors later than the b'nei me'ayim. So once the kaveh turns colors, okay, so then we know now that the b'nei me'ayim got a little bit too heated. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi at the two dots, about 12 lines down on Nun Vav Amud Beis, Hav Yelehahu Tarnagolas. He had a Tarnagolas that was exposed to fire. Shadre Lekame to Rabbi Lazar Hakapar Beribi. He sent it to Rabbi Lazar Hakapar. As we've seen many times in Shas, Beribi is a term of godless. Amar Le, he looked at the Tarnagolas, he looked at the Bnei Me'ayim. He said, Yiroken Havu Ve'achshere. This is exactly the opposite of what we would have expected. Our Mishnah on the top of Nun Vav Amud Aleph said that green is the bad color in this case. So how could Rabbi Lazar HaKapar Beribi say that green is kosher? Says the Gemara, V'ha'anan Tanan Yerokin Psulin. So what do we do about that? The Gemara says, Lo Amru Yerokin Psulin. When do we say that green is problematic? Ela bekurkaban belev uvekaved. Only with the kurkaban, which is the gizzard, the lave, which is the heart, and the kaved, which is the liver. Those are the only organs that we are worried about. Tanya Nami Hachi, we have something similar. Be'elu b'nei me'ayim, in the following innards of the animal, amru, this is where they said that we have this idea that green is problematic. Bekurkaban belev uvekaved. Next, quarter of the way down, we're going to probably stop at the Mishnah so we have a clean start on Shabbos, and we'll kind of do a marathon on Shabbos. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef havale hahu tarnagolta. He also had a small bird. Shadra lekamed Rabbi Abo, and he brought it to Rabbi Abo to paskin on it. V'amar le adumin havu v'trefa. It's red and it's trefa, again backwards. Green should have been problematic. Red is normal color. So why are you saying now, Rabbi Abo, that red is problematic? Red is what it should be. Why would this be true? That's what our Mishnah said. Our Mishnah said that im yerokin psulim, im adumim ksherim. So why are you saying that which is red is problematic? So the Gemara says, Amar le adumim shehoriku, v'yerokin sheha'adimu trefa. That which should have been red and it turned green is problematic. That which should have been green and turned red is a trefa. Lo amru adumim ksherim. When is the only time we say that which is red is kosher? El belev bekurkavanu bekaved. The only time we say that which is red is kosher is with these three organs. Next, almost halfway, the third of the way down. Omar Reb Shmuel bar Chia, Amar of Mani, Adumen shehoriku, if you have something that's red, that turns green, but when you cook it, it goes back to red, ushlakan v'chazru v'ha'edim uksherim, meaning the green was temporary. You're right, our Mishnah needed a tushtel. We're missing something in our Mishnah. We said that if it gets burned, it gets singed, and the innards turn green, that it's going to be a treifa. True, absolutely true, but only after you've cooked it, because after you've cooked it, if it goes back to red, the animal's kosher. It says the Gemara, why is this true? That if you cook it and it goes back to red, it's kosher. My taima, because kutra ailbehu. The only reason it looked that color was because of kutra, which is smoke. So because of all the smoke, again, the colors are hard to understand. We don't know exactly what color we're talking about. We know from all over Shas many times that the yarok that we're used to, and like when we look at our color palette and we see a green crayon, we're like, that's green. Their green was not our green. It was a yellowish, tingy type of material. So again, hard to know exactly what they're talking about, but the Gemara says over here that if after you cook it, it goes back to red, we are good to go. It must be that the smoke affected the top layer of this and it looked green, but really, in the scheme of things, it wasn't green because it healed up. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Af Anan Nomar, we will also say, Adumim shelo hiriku, that which was red that didn't turn green. Vishelokan vihoriku, and then it turned green, treifa. So we have our animal, then we cook it. It was already in a fire once. Now we're cooking it properly. And it got singed in the first fire. That wasn't cooking. The animal walked into a kivshan. Now it comes out. We have to make sure it's kosher. So now I cook it. It was red. I checked it before I put it in the oven in the pot to boil it. When it comes out, it's green. Treifa. My taima. Iglae behataihu. An interesting language. Rashi, a third of the way down, a little bit less maybe. It showed us its cherpa by cooking it and seeing that the red actually was green. Then that teaches me that what? That really it was damaged. It was burned in the singeing. Amar Ravashi, what does this imply? Hilkach lo lechol inish ela b'shalka. Perhaps if an animal has been singed, then the only way to know if it's kosher is because we're going to cook it. Because what do we know? That cooking can change red to green and green to red. If it changes green to red, you're good to go. If it changes red to green, it's a treifa. So it seems from the way the Gemara is talking that we need to cook it in order to tell what it is. Because through the cooking process, something might happen that changes the color. So therefore, without cooking, we won't know. So says the Gemara, that's what Rav Ashi says, Velohi. The Gemara rejects this. Why? Achzuke reisa lo machzakina. We don't, this is a very interesting line. I mean, it's a Shas concept that we shouldn't have to assume bad. Now, I have a hard time with that because why aren't we assuming bad? The animal just got singed. You're assuming good? So it seems what the Gemara is saying is that if after the singeing you see a color at face value. We don't assume that the cooking process will invert and revert, whatever the right word is, and switch the colors. That's what seems from the Gemara and seems to be the accepted response. If an animal does get singed and the resulting color of that prior to boiling it is that the animal seems to be red, then it's kosher. If it seems to be green, then it's treif, but only in regards to the kurkavan, the lave, and the kavit. Last few lines for the night. Drasa, the tarfa bakosel, trampled and pushed against the wall. Amr Rebbe Lazar ben Antigonus mishum Rebbe Lazar bar Yanai. Achas zu ve'achas zu. In either of these cases, it's not just stam kosher. Tzricha bedika, you have to check it to make sure that it's kosher. The Gemara doesn't detail how, but that's what the Gemara says. We'll stop right here at the new Mishnah. What day is this? What, it's Thursday? Today's Thursday. Good. Mir Hashem will pick up on Shabbos at the new Mishnah. Wishing you all a beautiful night.
Picture.